The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 219.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have John Sviokla, author of The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, How Extreme Producers Create Massive Value. Welcome, John, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
My pleasure, Wade. Great to be here.
Before we dive into your book, which I love the title, but The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Absolutely. My name is John Sviokla. I'm a partner in the PricewaterhouseCoopers consulting division, and I head up our thought leadership. I've been there for about 4 years, and for a dozen years before that, I was a consultant at a company called Diamond, and for a dozen years before that, I was a professor at Harvard Business School in the area of technology, strategy, and innovation.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump right into your book, The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, How Extreme Producers Create Massive Value, which was made available not that long ago, actually very end of the year, December 30th, 2014. And John, we're going to move quickly here. But our whole goal here is to cover the top questions that the listener and future reader have before they purchase the book. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing The Self-Made Billionaire Effect?
Well, the inspiration was very straightforward, which was I was talking with my co-author, Mitch Cohen, and PwC is really about helping our clients create value. And I said to Mitch, look, why don't we study the people who've created the most value on the planet? And that's those self-made billionaires, and see what we can learn from them that other people can benefit from.
And what would you say makes your book different from others regarding the same topic?
Well, actually, it's the first ever systematic study of self-made billionaires. So we started in 2012, and we looked at all the billionaires in the world, and there's just over 1,200 of them. Roughly 2/3 of them are self-made, about 840. Then we looked for the ones that had made that money in pretty transparent markets, so we could see how they made it, just in case they made it by some nefarious means or not. So 600 in transparent markets. And then we took a 1 in 5 sample, 120 of them, and did extensive profiling of those individuals. And then we interviewed 16 from anywhere from 2 hours to 2 days. And that's the most extensive fact-based ever on this kind of entrepreneur class.
So, John, this next question is more about the structure, how you designed the book to be read. And we're asking, how would you suggest the reader engage? Is this a book that they can jump in and jump out, selecting information as needed at that moment for them? Or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
It's really a book you can jump in and jump out of. And we also have a just under 4-minute cartoon on YouTube. If you put in Sviokla and Billionaire and animated, you'll find it. And it gives you some of the core ideas of the book in less than 4 minutes. The introduction of the book tells you that these people are not who you think they are. 80% of them made their money in highly competitive, contested markets. They 2/3 of them work for companies before. You also have the fact that some of them grew up poor, but some of them grew up pretty middle class or relatively privileged. So there's really no pattern. It's not just tech billionaires. And you can see those issues in the introduction. And we also talk about the habits of mind that make them successful, and you can dive into those.
So, John, we know some of the purpose, we know some of the background, how you suggest it being read. Now let's take a deep dive into the content itself. So we take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really give this listener, this future reader, a great idea of what your book's all about.
Absolutely. So the core notion that the book talks about is underneath every billion-dollar opportunity. If you look and peel back the onion, what you will see is what we call a producer or a producer-performer pair. And a producer is the kind of person that knows how to design a business from scratch and to get all those design variables and to land them well. And that's true whether these people are doing it in pizza or coffee or high tech. And producers are think of them as architects and performers as builders. And they work together, two people, producer, performers. Now, the first thing is, as I mentioned before, these people are not who you think. They come from all walks of life. They're not necessarily firstborn or start poor. They have different educational backgrounds. So when you look at the different billionaires, they have very different backgrounds. So you take a person like Eli Broad, the person who started KB Homes. He started out as an accountant, and he thought, gee, I can make a home cheaper, faster, better by having no basement and only having a lean-to garage. He built a dozen of them with his uncles, sold them in a weekend, and that was the beginning of KB Homes. Then he had the notion of, gee, I need to create another product for these people. So he bought Sun America and created one of the best annuity companies, and he's the only person living today to create 2 Fortune 500 companies. So again, not a background you'd expect. Then we looked at what makes them distinctive, and what we found were these 5 habits of mind. And the 5 habits of mind are inventive execution, empathetic imagination, a relative view of risk, patient urgency, and producer-performer pairing. Let me start with empathetic imagination. So empathetic imagination is a combination of understanding where a market's going as well as a rational understanding of what the economic opportunity might be. So I mentioned Eli Broad just a minute ago. When Howard Schultz was starting out Starbucks, he thought about the fact that Americans wanted a latte, but they couldn't buy one anywhere. So he had that empathetic imagination to make that happen, but he combined it with inventive execution. So when you look at Starbucks, it wasn't just about the coffee, and there were a ton of coffee companies out there. He put together the fact that he had a very, very small footprint for the store when he first started. So he had only 300 square feet. It was teeny stores, which allowed him to get cash-on-cash return very quickly. He'd get the money back from the build-out in as little as 6 or sometimes 3 months. Allowed him to have more control of the stores. He was willing to pay people more to be behind the counter. He had the best part-time benefits of any company. So that allowed him to have a better quality person behind the counter. He did early fair trade coffee. 25 years ago, he was worried about eco-friendly fair trade coffee. And then he had the great branding and positioning he has. So that inventive execution, he reinvented the coffee experience along with that empathetic imagination. So let's turn to this notion of patient urgency. If you turn to a guy like Joe Mansueto, and Joe created Morningstar, the mutual fund rating company. And when Joe was looking at the creation of Morningstar, he had the idea for doing Morningstar because mutual funds were just coming out. He was an active investor himself, and he collected all the different descriptions of the different mutual funds that are out in the marketplace. And he said, gee, if somebody put an index together, this would be a good thing. But he wanted to be sure that the timing was right. So he followed it for 18 months and studied the market and studied the market. And he was convinced at that point that, yes, mutual funds were going to go like crazy. And it was then he started the first Morningstar report. So that notion of patient urgency, to be able to pay attention and to be curious and to stick with something until the timing is right and then move quickly. When we look at the issue of the relative view of risk, think of a company like Keurig. They've got a fantastic franchise in coffee, but they were willing to take the risk to come up with a brand new product in the area of soda and drinks. So as of fall of this year, they are launching a new product that has a little hockey puck that you throw into a thing that looks like a Keurig machine. And under a minute, you get a perfectly carbonated beverage, chilled to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is just fantastic. And in order to do that, they had to create whole new technologies to be able to deliver that where they have no CO2 canister. And the CO2 is actually inside the hockey puck itself. And they expect it to be a phenomenal new product. But they're willing to take those risks, create new competencies to create that new value. And the last thing really is about the partnership between producers and performers. The idea that you don't have to be everything. If you're that kind of person who's had design and land a business, you need to get and partner with someone else. Or if you're a performer, you need to go and find a producer because you don't want to hook your wagon to a barge. You want to hook it to a shooting star. So find someone who knows how to design and deliver those businesses, and you're going to be a lot more successful yourself.
John, you just went through a ton of great content. And that's why I feel like this question might be somewhat tough because we're asking you to break it down a step further. Out of everything you just discussed with us and everything that you put in your book, if the reader could only take away one takeaway from the entire thing, what would you personally want that to be?
The one thing I would say is follow your curiosity about an opportunity area and don't separate thinking from doing. That if you want to pursue it yourself and get the resources and create the sales pitch, both for the thing itself and how you get those resources to make it happen. So believe in your idea, have the curiosity to follow it through, and package it up in a way that can get the resources to make it real.
Excellent. There was some things that hopefully some people wrote down in what you just said, and there's some quote-worthy things. And that leads into our next question, which is, do you have a favorite quote from your book? And can you take a minute to explain what it means to you?
Yes. The favorite quote in my book is from Terence McKenna, where he says that the universe is a fight between habit and novelty is winning. And what you see in these self-made billionaires is that they are willing to look at an existing thing, whether it be, underwear with Spanx, or Little Caesars pizza with pizza, or Elon Musk with the electric car. And they're willing to find that economically viable novelty, and they have the courage to make it real.
So, John, we'll put that quote in the show notes at the elpodcast.com so people can go back and refer back to that. And this next question is actually our last question. We're asking you that if there was only one book you could recommend, based on the way that it's impacted your life, created a huge paradigm or lifestyle shift, which book would you suggest?
The book I would suggest is Life Unlocked, because it talks about the neuroscience of change and how you can get your mind to actually do the changes that you want to achieve.
I see. And what was that book title one more time?
It's Life Unlocked.
Life Unlocked.
7 Revolutionary Lessons to Overcome Fear.
Perfect. Well, very good. And John, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get more information on your book, The Self-Made Billionaire Effect?
Yes. If you go to pwc.com/billionaire, we have the animated cartoon, the links to the book, a series of videos, 19 different articles, and television and radio interviews.
Excellent. That's perfect. And we'll put those notes in the show notes, or those links that you just said in the show notes as well. And John, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us today.
My pleasure, Wade. It was great to be with you.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you want more information on John or his book, The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.